Now we will meet Mary Beard, Professor of Classics at University of Cambridge. Mary will be talking to the CEO of Nobel Prize Outreach, Laura Sprechmann, on the topic, What can classic teach us?
Mary Beard, I'm thrilled to speak with you. You have given the classics a public engagement and interest. So my first question to you would be, why do classics matter?
They matter because they're part of the past that I think we have to go on talking to. And they're part of a past which has formed the present. Now, look, nobody would say that even in the West, the only ancestor Western culture has is a Greco-Roman one. That is simply not true, but it is a very important one. And as it were, to cut that off, not to look at it any longer, always seems to me kind of the equivalent of a very nasty amputation. It would be like culture and thinking cutting off its leg and deciding not to use it any longer. It's part of us still, renegotiated, redebated, and still exciting.
Very much so. And so what could we learn from the past? And should we find the connections to now, or is it just interesting by itself?
Well, I think you learn, if you look at the past, you learn about the past, but just as important and probably more important is that you learn about the present too. And you learn about why you think as you do. And I think that it would be impossible now for us to understand our engagement, our debates, our differences about democracy, imperialism, racism, without someone being able to open up the history of those debates, which go back to the 5th century BC or even before. You're learning about why it is you have come to talk about things that matter in the way you have.
Is that normally so? No-brainer. Do you see it that way when you watch people discussing on TV? You see it sort of as recurring themes that have been around. We approach them in different ways.
I mean, in some ways, yes. Thank heavens we've come on a bit since the Greeks and Romans. I don't think that the ancient world has got lessons to teach us in any kind of very direct way, and I don't think it's relevant in a very narrow way, in a very utilitarian way. But I think thinking about the similarities and differences between ancient democracy and our own version of democracy, I think makes us better observers and analysts of ourselves as well as the ancient world, And I think in some ways the ancient world enables us to see ourselves in a different light, and also to think about, why sexism in the way it remains? Why racism? I mean, I think you've got to go back to classical antiquity if you really want to understand that. Otherwise, it's an impoverished understanding, a very presentist understanding. But, I don't think you can do classics, you're buried in the past. Far from it. You're partly looking at the past, but more you're looking at us and trying to make us better citizens, really.
That's very well put. What drew you into studying classics? Was it exactly that? Was it sort of a hunger for understanding, or was it anything else?
I wish I could claim that. I would love to say that, when I was a kid, I wondered what liberty was and found all my way back to Cicero. In fact, it was archaeology that drew me in. It was a sheer romantic pleasure of knowing that 5 miles from my home in England, there was a Roman villa that I helped dig up. And, I picked up that coin that no one had touched for 2,000 years, and I held it in my hand. And so my first engagement, I have to confess, was visceral and emotional, and the sheer excitement of touching the past. I still have a bit of that too. It's still exciting.
And that's probably the best entry point into learning, right? Sort of a natural curiosity and a sort of a passion. It sounds like it when you describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I challenge anybody to go to Pompeii and Herculaneum and to look at those tragically buried cities, and not actually to feel an emotional wonderment about them first, but after that wonderment has gone, to feel a sense of an obligation, really, to the past and to us to find out more about them.
Yeah.
And it takes you, in all kinds of different ways. And I think that, look, there hasn't been a single day for 2,000 years when someone has not been reading Virgil's Aeneid. And that's because it's eye-opening and it's really worth reading. And it helps us engage not just with the Greeks and Romans, it helps us engage with the people who came before us and read Virgil's Aeneid. It's our connection with Dante, among other things. Or Homer and James Joyce. It's about a cultural embeddedness and a cultural critique, really. This is not, I don't admire the ancient world. I don't want to be a Greek or Roman. I'm really pleased I live in the 21st century. And I think in all kinds of ways the Greeks and Romans were horrible. But they so stimulated a whole chain of thinking and a tradition of thinking that, we can't lose that. We might do better than it, but we can't lose it.
And it certainly triggers our imagination as well, sort of to think about how it was and think about our present. So, unfortunately, I need to wrap it up, but you certainly triggered my imagination. So, thank you for this wonderful conversation, Mary Beard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.